Hello and welcome. In this particular screencast, we're going to be talking about how to organize a speech body. So, essentially, everything that goes in between the introduction and the conclusion. There will be a separate video that's on introductions and conclusions, and there's a whole nother video on my YouTube channel that explains outlining from beginning to end. So, you can watch any one of these, or I like to have things separated out so that I have one video that covers everything and then separate videos that cover elements so you can watch whichever ones are more targeted towards what you need. So, what we're going to do today to start off our discussion on the body of a presentation is how do we organize our main points? And essentially, you've identified what you want. You by now you've picked out a topic and you've thought about it, and maybe you've had some ideas knocking about in your head. So I always encourage people to start off with what they're passionate for or interested in and kind of go from there. You might not end up having a presentation on what your passion is, but at the same time, that's what gets the creative juices flowing in your brain. So, what I like to do is to brainstorm and concept map. And brainstorming is essentially where you just get a piece of paper, or if you're really into tech, then just get, a random whiteboard function on Zoom or something where you can draw. And I just start listing anything that comes into my head. Even if it has nothing to do with the topic, I just pop into a brainstorm and start listing ideas. So let's say that I want to give a presentation on the joys of being an aunt, okay? So I might write down the names of my nieces and nephews and the age groups and the personality types and how annoying it is to teach them how to go potty and how much I enjoy being able to send them home at the end of the day. And then I can talk about parenting tips and aunting tips and child-proofing your home versus having a home that's welcoming to children. And I can just sit here and just list. And again, I know I'm not going to put all 52 of those ideas into my speech. I'm just getting ideas out. Because let's say I want to talk about being an aunt, and then I hit upon this idea of making your home child friendly. And I go, that's a better speech topic. Let's talk about that because that way it's not just a house for kids, it's just a house that welcomes kids. And what can I do? For example, in my house, I have a bunch of nieces and nephews. And so there's a room in the house that just has kids' stuff, and they know. And anytime I go by Dollar Tree or whatever, I might pick up another random item to put in there. And kids know every time they walk into my house, they march right up to their room and they get their stuff and they do what they're going to do and they know that that's safe. Everything that's in there is for them. If they destroy it, who cares? It cost me $1. And so now I've got a more interesting idea that I can play with and examples and ideas and how to keep it cheap. And here's a craft. And now I've got something to do. And once you've done that brainstorm and kind of stimulated your thinking passages a little bit, you move on to concept mapping, which is where you organize your thoughts. I'm sure a lot of us, whenever we were going through elementary school, probably had some teachers introduce concept maps right around the time of second grade. And what a concept map is essentially a bubble map. So you'll have an idea in a bubble like children. And then offshoots that have their own bubbles might be children, care, and then care might have offshoots off of those bubbles and those. And so, what you essentially do with a concept map is you kind of visually lay out how to organize your information. If I have 52 items on a brainstorm map, that's where my list is for my concepts. So, I then create a concept map of the big idea, the larger main points, the supporting details and examples, and I'll end up having this really intricate bubble map where it just tells me what my best ideas are. You might find out that you have one idea that has 17 bubbles off of it, and then another idea that has two bubbles. We'll go with the 17 bubble one. Now you know what your main points and supporting details can be, and now you know what to research. So I find concept maps to be incredibly helpful when you are a visual person. If you learn best by seeing something, then a concept bubble map is what you should get yourself into. And you can actually just Google those. You can Google concept bubble map and it'll pop up a lot of different images that'll help you see what this might look like. If I find any good examples and you're in one of my classes, I'll post them for you. Whenever you do figure out your main points because you've brainstormed, you've bubble mapped, you've organized them into categories, you then make sure that you word them the same way Because when we're brainstorming, we're just putting words down. They don't necessarily match, but whenever you want to get them into a speech, I generally recommend three main points for a presentation. You want to make sure that they use parallelism, which means they're worded the same way. So if my first main point is to proof the home, so be proof the home, then my next main point would be to prepare the food. So you see how it sounds the same? It's blank the blank. That's called parallelism. Whenever the order matches, they look the same. The reason we do that is it provides auditory structure, that means listening structure, whenever someone's listening to you. If your main ideas are worded the same way and the supporting details are a little bit diverse, our ears can pick up on whenever you've switched from one main idea to the next. Another tidbit is, of course, to use a basic outline, which is what the rest of this and the next lecture are going to be about. You can organize your main points in different ways. It depends on your topic. The first one that you can use is time order. And time order is when the order of operations is very important. Let's say that you're giving a presentation on how to bake a cake. You probably begin with preheat the oven. You don't start with, and then we put the batter in the pan, because your audience doesn't know what batter, what pan, what temperature, any of that. You begin at the beginning. So time order presentations are used when the order of your talking points has to be in a certain order in order for it to make sense. A narrative order is whenever you're using your presentation to tell a story. So you might have a beginning, middle, and an end. Some people, and I'm sure you've seen this in a lot of movies, the first scene in the movie will actually be a scene that happens later in the movie. It stimulates interest. You're like, how did we get here? Or it could be a flashback to a previous movie to catch us up. It's kind of reminding us what the storyline is or where the story's going before it kind of gets into the beginning, middle, and end. The last one, and this is probably the one that you're going to use, would be a topical order. And this is when your main points are just organized point by point, category by category. So if I was talking about, again, my topic about providing a hospitable home for children if they're visiting, not, living there, then I might have entertainment, food, and safety as my three topics for that presentation. So, again, they're larger categories, and it doesn't really matter what order they go in. I could talk about food first or last. I could talk about safety first or last. It doesn't matter. So, when it doesn't matter what order the information's in, it's probably a topical speech because it's organized by category. If it does matter what order it's in, it's probably time order. And if you're telling a story, it's definitely narrative order. Whenever you get into the development of your topic, you want to draft your thesis statement. And while I'll cover this in another video, your thesis statement is essentially the overarching theme for your presentation. When I'm teaching in live classes, the way I refer to this as is the one thing your audience should walk away knowing. If your audience remembers nothing else about you or your presentation, they should remember this one thing. And that one thing is your thesis. It is a broad statement, overarching, telling me what we're here to accomplish today. And it should be specific without going into your main points, because your main points get mentioned in something different called a preview. After you have your thesis statement, again, that overarching purpose for your presentation, we do get into supporting material. And this could be research, it could be presentation aids, it's anything that helps bulk up and fill out your presentation. You do want to have transitions or signposts. In my classes, I require transitions, and transitions are essentially sentences that tell me how we're getting from one main point to another. So a transition would sound like, now that we've talked about entertainment, let's move on to food prep. It's something that says, now that I'm done talking about this, let's move on to that. Transitions are crucial because without them, a presentation has the tendency to sound like one big long blob of information. A transition is an auditory cue for your audience to hear that you're moving along in your presentation. Transitions are typically a full sentence. A signpost is typically a word or phrase. So a signpost is something like first, next, secondly, lastly, to begin, It's a simple word or phrase that's just kind of plunked in there to signify a little bit of movement, whereas a transition would be used in between major portions of the presentation. So, a rule of thumb for me is that transitions are used between major sections and signposts are used inside of those major sections. Continuing our discussion, you need to outline the body of the presentation. And one of the things that you do is have a formal sentence outline. If you are in one of my classes, our textbook does come with examples. If you are in the class that is speaking out of, I believe it's called Speak 4, then the example in the textbook is rather intimidating. It is exceptionally long, it's 4 or 5 pages long, and it is probably for a 20-minute presentation at least, but we're not doing that in one of my classes. If you're looking at this for your own information on YouTube, then a formal sentence outline or formal sentence outline is essentially an outline where you have written out each of your points in full sentences. And I know that sounds repetitive, but that's what it is. It is when you have thought through every element of your presentation. So you've gone through your main points and you've written out the data. You have included the supporting materials. You have put your transitions and signpost in place. So that way you know the flow of your presentation and how it's going to sound. After you have a formal sentence outline, you do go back and develop that into a speaking outline. These are also known as keyword outlines, and they have significantly less text. My PowerPoints would be an example of keyword outlines. I don't have written out everything I want to say, and I'm also not reading to you from the textbook because could you imagine? I would love to know how many people would actually watch a YouTube channel where someone just read textbooks to them. I'll have to look that up. But a formal sentence outline is what I like to call the full body. So it's got the flesh, the skin, the bones, the nerves, everything. It's the whole enchilada. The speaking outline is when you kind of take it all back to just the skeleton, whenever it's just the bare bones of the presentation. And the reason we have speaking outlines is one, you are supposed to practice your sentence outline enough to know what you're going to say so that you don't read it and we move to your speaking outline. The speaking outline is simply a reference outline to help keep you on track for major components. It should not be something that has enough information in it for you to read it. Okay? Like, I don't want you to give a presentation where you've developed this gorgeous outline and then this is what I get from you the entire time because you're reading. What you want to do is practice from that sentence outline where you thought it all out, and then you eventually just remove information until you've peeled it back to the speaking outline where you just have a few keywords on the page and you're still able to deliver all the information. It does require practice, but by golly, you are a much better presenter with things that way. If you tend to have any speaking apprehension or anxiety, having a lot of text in front of you is actually not comforting at all because you will lose your place, you won't be able to find it again, which spikes your anxiety, and you'll end up reading to us, which is not going to be attractive, and neither will the grade be. So, when it comes to outlining, have a formal sentence outline where you write everything out and you think it through, and then you start kind of culling it back, trimming and pruning until you get it formed into a speaking outline which has keywords. So, if you were in one of my classes, what I want you to do on your own is to check out the examples that are in your textbook or in our D2L content tab. I try to provide empty templates that are like keyword outlines and then full sentence examples as well, so you can see what both elements of those look like. I would like you to brainstorm your main points and map them out visually using a concept bubble map, and pick out your best ideas, organize them, and try to draft your thesis. And the reason you notice that your thesis comes last is, as you heard from me earlier today, I started out with one topic in mind, but by the time I'd brainstormed for like 30 seconds, I'd already found a topic I liked better. I wanted to talk about being an aunt, but then I thought having a really child friendly home was just more entertaining. So, off the track into a different direction, there I go. So, you draft your thesis after you've done all the rest of this organization. That's the only way to make sure that your thesis statement really encapsulates all of your major points. So, for my presentation, what my thesis would be for my child friendly home would be: How many of you don't have children of your own, but have a lot of children in your family? That's my attention grabber. I'm here today to give you a presentation on how to make your home the most hospitable it can possibly be for that wild and crazy younger generation. Period. There you go. And my preview will break down food, prep, safety, whatever it might be. But my thesis statement is something as simple as I am here to tell you how to prepare your home for that wild and crazy younger generation. And that's as fun as it needs to be. So, check out the examples, do some brainstorming and mapping, organize your thoughts, and try to come up with an entertaining thesis that encapsulates the idea and purpose of what you want to achieve. Enjoy your day. Have a good one.